protection from anything that could cause you harm.
Very good. Okay, so we've got the Garden of Eden and paradise. So let's move on to our next two paragraphs, paragraphs 5 and 6. How was that paradise lost?
God put Adam and Eve in such a paradise, but they did not remain in it. Why? They disqualified themselves by disobeying God. Thus, paradise was lost for them and their offspring. Though without human occupants, that garden apparently remained until the deluge of Noah's day. Some may wonder, will any man, woman, or child ever be able to enjoy paradise on earth? What do the facts show? If you hope to live with your loved ones in paradise, do you have a valid basis for your hope? Could you explain why paradise is sure to come?
Okay, paragraphs 5 and 6 question. How was paradise lost? And leading to what question? Let's get Jamal Cunningham Jr., please.
Paradise was lost by Adam and Eve, who disobeyed a very clear instruction, which was not to eat off of the tree of knowledge of good and bad, but they could eat off of any other tree.
Very good, thank you. And let's get Ivan, please.
The way that we still have paradise is because of Jesus' sacrifice.
Okay, good, thank you. Let's have Josiah Crochet.
They got themselves kicked out, and in the process, also the offspring couldn't enjoy it as well.
Very good, that's where we find ourselves, right? Sister Virginia Rogers.
You just on that one point about being lost, because when Jehovah told them something, like it was brought up, they disobeyed him, so he had to take action. And like the scripture brings out, he drove them out of that Garden of Eden. They were no longer welcome, and he had to post cherubs to keep them from going back in.
Very good, and how long did that last? Sister Chamberlain.
And what's so sad about it is they would no longer be working to enlarge that garden and spread it to paradise conditions to the end of the earth. They had access all over the earth to make it a paradise. So now they are now forever banned, but we aren't.
Very good, thank you. And Sister Hilliard, please, Glenda Hilliard.
So it brings up the question, will any man, woman, or child ever be able to enjoy paradise on earth and go to destruction?
Very good. And how long was that garden there, according to the paragraph? Was it Harris?
So that was some 1,600 years, right up until the flood. So everybody that was alive on the earth at that time could actually see what was going on, and they had a pretty clear picture of where they were at. It just shows how people's heart conditions can go.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. So that leads to what question? We answered a couple of them. There's still a couple more. Since we lost paradise, Sister Crochet, please. Shemila Crochet.
If you hope to live with your loved ones in paradise, do you have a valid basis for your hope?
Okay, thank you. And one more question we're going to be considering next. Sister Smith, please.
And also brought death for all mankind.
Okay, thank you, Sister Smith. We still have one question that we're going to consider in this article. Sister Huey up front.
Could you explain why the paradise is sure to come?
Exactly. So we all believe in paradise coming. Now we want to be able to explain it to someone who has questions. So let's move on to our next subheading, Indications of Paradise to Come, paragraph 7 and 8.
The logical place to find answers is in the book inspired by the creator of the original paradise. Consider what God told his friend Abraham. God said that he would multiply Abraham's offspring like the grains of sand on the seashore. And Jehovah made this meaningful promise, by means of your offspring, all nations of the earth will obtain a blessing for themselves because you have listened to my voice. God repeated that basic promise to Abraham's son and grandson. There is no indication in the Bible that Abraham thought that humans would get a final reward in a heavenly paradise. So when God spoke of all nations of the earth as being blessed, Abraham would reasonably think of blessings on earth. The promise was from God, so it suggested better conditions for all nations of the earth. Did further developments among God's people support such thinking?
Okay, so before we ask the A question, let's have a reader for Genesis 26:4. Somebody can read that. Sister Donna Miller, please, and then also a reader for Genesis 28:14. Sister Joe, please.
Genesis 26:4. I will multiply your offspring like the stars of the heavens, and I will give to your offsprings all these lands. And by means of your offspring, all nations of the earth will obtain a blessing for themselves.
Okay, thank you. Sister Joe, Genesis 28:14.
And your offspring will certainly become like the dust particles of the earth, and you will spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south, and by means of you, by means of your offspring, all the families of the ground will certainly be blessed.
Okay, thank you very much for those fine readings. So there's some nice scriptures that we can reason on right there. So let's ask the A question. God made what promise to Abraham? Let's get Jade on, please.
Jehovah clearly told Abraham that his children would be, that his offspring would be in paradise.
Okay, thank you. And Sister Williams, please.
When Abraham was told this, he knew it had to be on the earth, because both of these scriptures support that the paradise would be on the earth and not in heaven.
Okay, thank you. And Sister Virginia Rogers, please.
Because when he made that initial promise to Abraham, he told him, he said, by means of your offspring, all nations of the earth will obtain a blessing for themselves. So he had no reason to think, well, okay, we're going to heaven. No, he was thinking of the earth, and like it brings out, Jehovah repeated the basic promise to his son and grandson.
Very good, thank you. And Sister Johnson, please.
In Genesis 28:14, it mentions the ground. I'm not sure about heaven, but I believe that meant there was gravity.
Exactly, yeah. There's nice concrete proof there, right? So let's move on to the B question. God's promise might have led Abraham to think of what? Sister, okay?
Abraham would have thought that this blessing will be on the earth.
Very good, thank you. So nice reasoning scriptures we can use here and explain to people why we have a solid basis for thinking that we're all going to live together on a beautiful paradise earth. So that's just the start of it. Let's continue on and let's look at some later promises from the Bible.
David, one of Abraham's descendants, pointed to a future time when evil men and wrongdoers would pass away. The result, the wicked will be no more. Instead, the meek will possess the earth, and they will find exquisite delight in the abundance of peace. David was also inspired to predict the righteous will possess the earth, and they will live forever on it. What effect do you think those assurances had on people who wanted to do God's will? They would have a basis for expecting that if only righteous people were living on earth, in time a paradise like the Garden of Eden would be restored. Over time, most Israelites claiming to serve Jehovah turned their backs on him and on true worship. So God let the Babylonians conquer his people, ruin their land, and carry many of them into exile. Still, God's prophets foretold that after 70 years, his people would return to their homeland. These prophecies were fulfilled, but they also have meaning for us. As we consider some of them, bear in mind our focus, a coming paradise on earth.
Paragraphs 9 and 10, the question, what later promises provided a basis for expecting coming blessings? Sister Hilliard, please.
Yes, David foretold that in Psalm, foretold that the meek ones would possess the earth and that they would find exquisite delight in the abundance of peace. he also said that there'd be no more wicked people on the earth. And he even said how long that will be, that the righteous will possess the earth and they will live forever on it.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Brother Rogers, please.
2 Samuel 23:2 states that when David said this, he acknowledged that God's Spirit spoke through him. And so this wasn't what David had in mind. This is what Jehovah inspired him to have recorded in the Bible regarding a paradise.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So it's clear from these scriptures that people would be living on the earth in paradise. So what happened to the Israelites? Why didn't they get to experience that? Sister Virginia Rogers.
Well, like it brings out in the paragraph, over time, they forgot about Jehovah. They went to doing their own thing. And Jehovah had prophesied that he would have a people with an unintelligible language come and carry them off. And that happened with the Babylonians. But he made a promise that he would not bring a complete extermination of that land that they were in, that after a certain amount of years, they would return to that land and experience certain conditions. And like it brings out, it not only had a meaning for them, but also us.
Very good, thank you. Sister Fraser, please.
So if they just would have followed, it just even remembered that the righteous will possess the earth. So that means if they're to be righteous, they had to be doing right by Jehovah's standards. So only when they were rebelling and doing what they wanted to do, then Jehovah had just reason to allow them to be taken over by the Babylonians.
Okay, thank you for sharing that with us. Okay, so we're getting our focus in mind here. And just what is our focus? Why are we talking about prophecies that happened so long ago in the Bible? Sister Martinez. Sandra Martinez.
Because we're talking about a paradise that we know is still coming on the earth, so we're waiting for it.
Very good, and it applies to us, not just God's people at that time. Okay, very good. Let's move on to paragraph 12. But we're going to need a reader for these scriptures before we read paragraph 12. Brother Thompson, would you like to read Isaiah 35, verses 5 through 10? Did I miss paragraph 11? I did. Paragraph 11. How about Brother Thompson, you read Isaiah 11, 6 through 9, then we'll have the paragraph read.
The wolf will reside for a while with the lamb, and with the young goat the leopard will lie down, and the calf and the lion and the fattened animal will all be together, and a little boy will lead them. The cow and the bear will feed together, and their young will lie down together. The lion will eat straw like the bull. The nursing child will play over the lair of a cobra, and a weaned child will put his hand over the den of a poisonous snake. They will not cause any harm or any ruin in all my holy mountain, because the earth will certainly be filled with the knowledge of Jehovah as the waters cover the sea.
Okay, thank you, Brother Thompson. So let's have Brother Alban read paragraph 11 for us.
God foretold through Isaiah that after his people returned to their homeland, they would not have to struggle against harsh, dangerous elements, nor would they need to fear attacks from animals or beasts like men. Young and old would be safe. Does that not bring to your mind conditions such as those God provided in the Garden of Eden? The prophecy through Isaiah also said that the whole earth, not just the nation of Israel, would be filled with the knowledge of Jehovah as the waters cover the sea. When will that happen?
Paragraph 11 question. Isaiah 11, 6 through 9 that Brother Thompson read for us had what fulfillment, but what question remains? Sister Diamato, please.
Well, it had a partial fulfillment because it just applied to the nation of Israel. It didn't extend to the whole earth. And Isaiah chapter 11, there in verse 9, it says that the earth will certainly be filled with the knowledge of Jehovah. So that helps us to reason that this would extend to the whole earth, not just to the nation of Israel.
Very good. And what would the Israelites expect when they return back home after 70 years being gone and just leaving it? Sister Cruz, please.
Well, after 70 years, the land would be wild. There would be lots of wild animals and people afraid for attacks. But Jehovah promised that they did not need to be afraid of these things, that Jehovah would help them be safe, and that they would have conditions that would be peaceful, and that they'd be able to be happy in their homeland. And so although these conditions were not completely fulfilled, we look forward to the time of when it will be fulfilled all over the earth.
Okay, thank you. Brother Rogers, please.
And then Jehovah had prophesied to his people there, Isaiah 51:3 again, that they would return back, not to heaven, but to their land. And of course, it would be turned from a wilderness into Eden, which is associated with a paradise. And so here again, it's very clear that the Israelites were looking forward to the same paradise that we're looking forward to.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Sister Huey up front.
I always like a word picture that the whole earth will be filled with the knowledge of Jehovah as the waters cover the sea. And when the waters cover something, it is completely covered. There's nothing left. So this is how it will be.
Very good. Thank you. And Sister Chamberlain, please.
The scripture in Isaiah 11:6-9 helps us to appreciate that the whole world will be transformed into a secure, peaceful paradise as it was meant to be. And it would be inconsistent for Jehovah to inspire such a prophecy only to have a spiritual meaning and not have it actually happen on earth.
Okay, good. So the Israelites knew when they're going to go back and experience this, 70 years, right? What question comes up for us? Knowing all this logical question, next question would be, Sister Lelania Marin?
Well, we want to know, when will this happen?
When is all this going to happen? All this good news. So as we move on in our article, we're going to be able to answer that question. Now in paragraph 12, we're going to need a reader first for Isaiah 35, 5 through 10. Brother J. Marin, would you like to read that for us? Let's do that right now. Isaiah 35, 5 through 10.
At that time, the eyes of the blind will be opened, and the ears of the deaf will be unstopped. At that time, the lame will leap like deer, and the tongue of the speechless will shout for joy. For waters will burst forth from the wilderness, and streams in the desert plain. The heat-parched ground will become a reedy pool, and the thirsty ground springs of water. In the lairs where jackals rested, there will be green grass and reeds and papyrus. And a highway will be there, yes, a way called the way of holiness. The unclean one will not travel on it. It is reserved for those one walking on the way. No one foolish will stray onto it. No lion will be there, and no vicious wild beast will come on it. They will not be found there. Only the repurchased ones will walk there. Those redeemed by Jehovah will return and come to Zion with a joyful cry. Unending joy will crown their heads. Exultation and rejoicing will be theirs, and grief and sighing will flee away.
Okay, thank you, Brother Marin. So let's have paragraph 12 read, and notice what the Israelites were looking forward to when they returned home.
Isaiah further emphasized that the returnees would not be threatened by animals or humans. Their land would produce abundant fruit, made possible by an ample supply of water, even as the Garden of Eden was well watered. Would that be the only fulfillment? There's no evidence that those returning from exile were miraculously cured. For example, the blind did not regain their sight, So God was indicating that literal healings would yet occur.
Paragraph 12, the A question. Those returning from exile in Babylon experience what blessings? Brother J. Marin?
Again, if you remember the description of the paradise in our first few paragraphs, they did talk a little bit about water, and that's exactly what the returning Israelites would find. They would find a land that would be very much garden-like. They wouldn't be harmed by other humans. They wouldn't be harmed by animals on the way. Instead, they would be refreshed by this garden with flowing waters.
Okay, thank you. Brother Cunningham, in the back, please.
Was also a blessing was the journey there. You know, on the highways, they were always threatened by hijackers or marauder bands. So, and aside from not worrying about the animals, you couldn't even travel safely on the road. But this road that they were going on will be protected, and unclean people or those that are going to do harm will not be found on there. So that was a tremendous blessing just to even make it to the place where Jehovah promised would be fruitful.
Okay, thank you. So that was the end of it then when they returned home. Let's ask the B question. What indicates that Isaiah 35, 5 through 10 has another fulfillment? Sister Gwen Cunningham.
Well, there was no evidence of them coming back and they would be miraculously cured, like it says in Isaiah 5. The eyes would be, the blind eyes would be open and the deaf ears would be unstopped. So because of that didn't happen, this indicates that Jehovah God had a literal healing that was going to happen yet to come.
Very good. Thank you for explaining that to us. Okay, Sister Mazik, please. Right there.
And the way that that prophecy is given, it shows that these miraculous curings were actually literal. They were not, they were a literal healing. And so once again, as the sister said, that did not occur, so that points to a fulfillment later.
Okay, good. So let's go on to paragraphs 13 and 14, another Bible scriptures that help us to prove that paradise is still coming. But we need a reader first for the scriptures here. Sister Wyrick, please, would you like to read Isaiah 65, 21 through 23?
It said, they will build houses and live in them, and they will plant vineyards and eat their fruitage. They will not build for someone else to inhabit, nor will they plant for others to eat. And the days of my people will be like the days of a tree, the work of their hands. My chosen ones will enjoy to the full. They will not toil for nothing, nor will they bear children for distress, because they are the offspring made up of those blessed by Jehovah, and their descendants with them.
Okay, thank you. So paragraphs 13 and 14, let's have those two paragraphs read now.
The Jews did not return to comfortable houses, nor did they find cultivated fields and vineyards. But that would change as God blessed them. What a joy for them to build houses and live in them. They could plant crops and enjoy the healthful fruitage. Notice an important detail of that prophecy. Will the time come when our days will be like the days of a tree? Some trees live thousands of years. Humans would have to be healthy in order to have lifespans of such length. If they could live in the conditions that Isaiah foretold, it would be a dream come true, a paradise. That prophecy will be fulfilled.
Paragraphs 13 and 14, the question, how did former exiles see the fulfillment of Isaiah 65, 21 through 23, but what part of that prophecy yet needs fulfillment? And we can use our opening picture if we like. Sister Glenda Hilliard.
Well, as we saw before, Jehovah was protecting them, but they didn't come back to a place where the houses were already built for them and all the food was there. They had meaningful work ahead of them, so they were able to build their own houses like the prophecy brought out, and also to plant the crops and enjoy that healthy fruitage. But that's as far as it went.
Okay, thank you. Brother John Marin.
Our illustration for these two paragraphs show the restoration, the brothers making their way back to the original lands, and beautiful expression on their faces. The two men that we see, kind of a satisfied. They were in inner joy, I would say. They were expressing to each other.
Okay, thank you. Sister Cunningham, Teacher Cunningham.
And although they had this joy, their age still played a factor, because it pointed out in the prophecy that they would live like the days of a tree, thousands of years. And we know at this time, although they were refreshed and they were happy to be back, they still didn't have that aspect of fulfillment.
Okay, thank you. And Sister Cruz, please.
I like how the paragraph brings up that it was a joy for them to build houses and to live in them. Today, when people are working on their homes or things, it's a lot of stress and anxiety, and it's definitely not a joy when they're building a home. But imagine with Jehovah's blessing, all these things will just be an enjoyable activity that will just bring us such fulfillment.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate that. So, what is it, in paragraph 14, what does it talk about a tree here? What's the significance of a tree? Brother Compton, please.
Long age. Giant sequoias and redwoods could be up to 2,000 years old. So when you compare life in a new world as to a tree, it means that we have endless life.
Okay, thank you. And Brother Cruz, please.
I like how the paragraph also helps us to appreciate that in order to live that long, we'd also have to have good health, because Joel is promising us not only a long, long life, but also a long, healthy life where we can enjoy all these things.
Yeah, otherwise it wouldn't do much good, would it? Sister Huey, please.
And we have our own Muir Woods, which is a world huge I forgot the word. But they have trees there that are up to 3,000 years old, so we have it in our own front yard.
Yeah, they're right here close by. I've actually seen one they cut down. It's probably about as wide as this stage here. And you can see the rings on the tree, and they had them marked. Jesus was here during this ring, way back 3,000 years ago. So those trees live a long time. So it's just giving us a little taste of what's coming in the future for us as humans. All right, Sister Ati, you had one comment too.
And just real quickly, that joy that we'll have, we won't be getting bored. So it'll be an amazing, amazing blessing on the earth and on humans.
Very good. I've heard people say that. It's going to be boring to live that long, but there's so much to do, there's no way we're ever going to be bored. So we're really looking forward to that. So let's move on now to paragraph 15, and let's talk about those prophecies we just read and how we can summarize them.
Reflect on how the promises just discussed point to a future paradise. People of the whole earth will be blessed by God. No one will face danger from animals or beasts like humans. The blind, deaf, and lame will be cured. People will be able to build their own homes and enjoy growing wholesome food. They will live longer than trees. Yes, we find indications in the Bible that such a future is ahead. Still, some might claim that we are reading more into those prophecies than is justified. How would you answer? What solid reason do you have to look forward to a real paradise on earth? The greatest man who ever lived provided a solid reason.
Paragraph 15 question. How would you summarize some of the blessings mentioned in the book of Isaiah? Let's get Ian Larry, please.
There would be no more danger, and animals will not harm us, and that humans will be able to live in paradise under peaceful conditions, and that there won't be no more blind and deaf and lame people, and they'll all be cured.
Okay, thank you. Very good. That's a good summary of that. So what if somebody says, well, that doesn't apply to us, you're just reading more into that, and it's really there. You're making it up. What do we say to that? Brother John Marin?
protection from anything that could cause you apart.
Very good. Okay, so we've got the Garden of Eden and Paradise. So let's move on to our next two paragraphs, paragraphs 5 and 6. How was that paradise lost?
God put Adam and Eve in such a paradise, but they did not remain in it. Why? They disqualified themselves by disobeying God. Thus, paradise was lost for them and their offspring. Though without human occupants, that garden apparently remained until the deluge of Noah's day. Some may wonder, will any man, woman, or child ever be able to enjoy paradise on earth? What do the facts show? If you hope to live with your loved ones in paradise, do you have a valid basis for your hope? Could you explain why paradise is sure to come?
Okay, paragraphs 5 and 6 question. How was paradise lost? And leading to what question? Let's get Jamal Cunningham Jr., please.
Paradise was lost by Adam and Eve, who disobeyed a very clear instruction, which was not to eat off of the tree of knowledge of good and bad, when they could eat off of any other tree.
Very good, thank you. And let's get Ivan, please.
The way that we still have paradise is because of Jesus' sacrifice.
Okay, good, thank you. Let's have Josiah Crochet.
They got themselves kicked out, and in the process, also the offspring couldn't enjoy it as well.
Very good. That's where we find ourselves, right? Sister Virginia Rogers.
You just on that one point about being lost, because when Jehovah told them something, like it was brought out, they disobeyed him, so he had to take action. And like the scripture brings out, he drove them out of that Garden of Eden. They were no longer welcome, and he had to post cherubs to keep them from going back in.
Very good. And how long did that last? Sister Chamberlain.
And what's so sad about it is they would no longer be working to enlarge that garden and spread it to paradise conditions to the end of the earth. They had access all over the earth to make it a paradise. So now they are now forever banned, but we aren't.
Very good, thank you. And Sister Hilliard, please. Glenda Hilliard.
So it brings up the question, will any man, woman, or child ever be able to enjoy paradise on earth, and what do the facts show?
Very good. And how long was that garden there, according to the paragraph? Was it Harris?
So that was some 1,600 years, right up until the flood. So everybody that was alive on the earth at that time could actually see what was going on, and they had a pretty clear picture of where they were at. It just shows how people's heart conditions can go.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. So that leads to what question? We answered a couple of them. There's still a couple more. Since we lost paradise, Sister Crochet, please. Shemaya Crochet.
If you hope to live with your loved ones in paradise, do you have a valid basis for your hope?
Okay, thank you. And one more question we're going to be considering next. Sister Smith, please.
And also brought death for all mankind.
Okay, thank you, Sister Smith. We still have one question we're going to consider in this article. Sister Huey up front.
Could you explain why the paradise is sure to come?
Exactly. So we all believe in paradise coming. Now we want to be able to explain it to someone who has questions. So let's move on to our next subheading, indications of paradise to come, paragraph 7 and 8.
The logical place to find answers is in the book inspired by the creator of the original paradise. Consider what God told his friend Abraham. God said that he would multiply Abraham's offspring like the grains of sand on the seashore. And Jehovah made this meaningful promise: by means of your offspring, all nations of the earth will obtain a blessing for themselves because you have listened to my voice. God repeated that basic promise to Abraham's son and grandson.